You're listening to the podcast Coffee with Mike and Julie, Libertarians Talk Psychology. This is current commentary from an MBA businessman and a PhD psychologist.
Look what they done to my song, Ma.
Is the United States really a free country? In some ways, we are one of the freest countries in the world, but not in all ways. So today, I want to lead with the question, are we really free? Or how free are we as a country?
I don't feel very free.
Okay, turn it off. No, I'm just kidding. So I want to lead with the Lee Greenwood song. And when I was watching that song, Proud to Be an American, and Trump was standing up and listening to the song, this is right after he was elected.
And he cried at inauguration.
Well,
Trump.
that was my whole point, is that here I am in the same room with you, and I'm kind of hiding the fact that I have a tear on my cheek, because I'm all, you already know how vulnerable I am.
All crackers love that song.
But here Trump
you aren't a true cracker unless you love Lee Greenwood's song.
It's a great song. And here Trump wipes a tear off his cheek, and I kind of feel like I connected with my president, because here I am with a tear on my cheek, and he has a tear on his cheek, and of course the
and you know he hates that.
Well, I don't know, maybe
I don't
he does.
know, yeah, maybe.
But the key phrase is, where at least I know I'm free. I mean, that's the big phrase. We all recognize it from that song.
That's the money shot, is at least
That's
I
right.
know I'm free.
Right. And
At least.
And so the question is just, are we really free compared to other countries? And first I want to say that I still say we are a great country. I don't want to get into this always criticizing the United States. We're great because of our free market system.
The what is that? The index, the
Index of Economic Freedom.
Yeah, we still do pretty well on
We
that.
do pretty well.
Yeah, okay. Even yet.
We
okay.
could do a lot better, but
Yeah.
we do pretty well.
Yeah.
But we're still a great country because we still embrace the free market system, and which frees people like you and me up to go into careers of our choice and pursue it with pretty good freedom and all that. So we have a great country. But here's some statistics about prisoners and prisons by country, and this is the prisoners per 100,000 of the population. So Germany is really good. Of the countries that I kind of admire and think are good countries, Germany only has 77 people per 100,000 people that they have in jail. Of course, China's statistic,
Don't even trust them. Forget China telling the truth about anything.
They're
not validated, not verified.
Right. So Canada and France are about the same at a little over 100 prisoners per 100,000 people. Iran and Russia are kind of bad. They're about 300 and Russia's about 350 prisoners per 100,000 people. So do you want to guess what the United States is?
I'm afraid to. Let me guess. 1,000.
No, I didn't that bad.
Oh, good. Good.
So just to say it again, Iran and Russia, about 300 or over 300. The United States is about 650 prisoners per 100,000 people. No other country was even close.
Yeah, I've heard that. We're the incarceration capital of the world.
Yes, we are.
Okay, well, I have a lot to say about that. Okay,
well, go ahead, go with it.
Well, been following, in the Times, I've been following a psychologist, very creative woman who got into addictions, and then she got into corrections. She's in the corrections department. In
Louisiana.
In Louisiana, yeah. And been following her and bringing her to conferences and things like that. And so,
I'm sorry, let me interrupt. because this is important what you're saying. The states, the lowest state for incarceration was Vermont, and the three states that were high were Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Mississippi.
Just wonder why
so
Oklahoma
here she is in one
Louisiana.
of the highest incarceration.
Yeah,
states in the
Louisiana was
country.
number one for years.
Yeah,
Number one.
So this woman's job is to do something about that.
Yeah,
Go
and she
ahead.
has these very, very innovative programs. But the bottom line here is that 86% of the people, I believe I'm correct about this statistic because I've been reporting on it, so I hope I'm close if I'm not off. 86% have some kind of mental health or addiction problem of those people incarcerated. So we use the prison as a housing for a lot of different other issues. There was Dr. Singh came and talked to us, and he was the head of corrections, and he just pointed out that, you know, we've got a lot of people pick someone up and it's a mental health issue or a drug addiction issue. That's where they go. They go in jail. They don't have any other place to go. There's just no method for figuring out what to do with people.
So my question would be, are those mental health and drug addicted people, would they be there of their own choice, or are they forced to be in those jails?
Well, they're forced. They're,
Yeah.
you know,
So
the
I
criminal
still say-
justice system decides they're a criminal, and she's doing this fantastic work. And with the governor, John Bell Edwards, they're doing this thing where they're releasing a bunch of people. But she did this fantastic work, getting the therapeutic programs into her facility. She's became a warden at one of the facilities, and she had this whole great innovative program. The program, one of the let me tell you example. One of the, and she's won awards for her programs.
And did you say her name?
Susan Tucker.
And she's a psychologist.
Psychologist, yeah.
Okay.
So one of the programs is so sweet. It's called Read to Me, Daddy. She gets the child of the incarcerated person in to a program where, and of course with COVID right now they're not. I'm sure they're not doing it. But the incarcerated, the offender, I think they call him offender, the offender, reads to their child, and see that motivates them to become a better father and a better person. And just think how cool that is.
It's really cool.
It really is. And then they have all kinds of programs like that. All kinds, and then they reintegrate the individual back into the community. And her recidivism rate was absolutely significantly by times lower than the regular recidivism rate when they're released. So, in other words,
She did a little therapy.
she did the whole enchilada. And so what that shows us is that we're taking away people's freedom, and then we're not treating the right problems. You're going to have some people that break the law, and none of this was I don't think she tackled any violent criminals. But I mean, the people that are drug addicted, they get into the drug culture, then there's violence there, but it's not exactly the same as like just sociopathic violence where people are murdering somebody for nothing, that kind of stuff.
So I love your phrase that we're not treating the right problem, because I think that relates to this thing that we've had lately with the race riots, and even the police, even though I think the police are a critical problem. But I'm very suspicious that just concentrating on race is trying to treat the wrong problem, or not looking at it right. I mean, I'll call it a symptom or whatever, because I don't think you're ever going to get rid of racism. But
we're going to be homogenized at some point in time.
But your comment from Susan Tucker that we're treating the wrong problem, or we're treating it the wrong way, or whatever, is right in line with what I'm thinking about. That I think our incarceration rate shows that we're overdoing it. we're overdoing
Or we're doing
it.
something wrong.
We're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
I don't care if those people are, mental problems. They don't need to be in a prison.
Well, here you get the complexity, and I mean, I'm not sure that I'm qualified to discuss this topic of freedom, but when you have freedom, you have people who choose to lie around on the street corner as a crackhead. Well, in our country, we arrest the crackhead and put him in jail, right?
No.
We don't.
Oh well.
But I mean, we give people a lot of freedom. I mean, the same discussion occurs to me with gun ownership. We have a lot of gun events in this country because we say everybody gets to have a gun. I mean, isn't it true that in a country with freedoms you would have more? I'm not saying deviant behavior, but you have more things happen with more freedom.
Okay, so you're bringing up a point which I don't know how to discuss this, but you're bringing up the point that we have so much freedom, like gun ownership, that it may be creating more crimes, more violent.
Well, I actually
crimes.
don't believe that, but I mean, we have let's say drugs. Okay, we have a lot of freedom to use drugs, and so people use illegal drugs, and then they get arrested for that. But I mean, is there some way to understand whether the freedom we have also creates more? I won't say more crime, but I mean, is it possible that freedom correlates with?
It could be. Could be, but
I'm not sure I believe
there may
it.
be some way to address that. However, on your point about drugs, we're not free about drugs.
Yeah, you're right.
We're free for doctor-prescribed drugs. That's free to us.
Oh
In
my
fact,
God!
you're
Don't
so
get me started
we're so
on that.
free that you can find a doctor who'll damn near prescribe anything for you if you wanted
Yeah,
to.
now we got everybody's on marijuana for anxiety or
And-
something.
but-
I mean, that's
but-
impressive.
But it's important to point out that we have the whole drug culture where you're not free, and they throw your ass in jail for another victimless crime because you
Yeah.
smoke marijuana in the wrong state or whatever you're
Yeah,
doing.
yeah.
So-
Well, okay. Well,
so
I
we're not
think
free.
I got us off track with that.
That's okay.
But the question today is, are we free? And you're saying the incarceration rate says we're not very free. Some people aren't free at all. They're in jail.
Yeah.
I just ran across that number of people that where you ask a random group of people, have they ever been arrested? And a high number have been arrested, especially men.
Well, I told you that I went to a Dooley family event, and there were about a dozen men in the room. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe it wasn't that many, but they were Dooleys and friends of Dooleys, and we started talking about who has spent the night in jail.
Yeah.
I was the only guy in the room who had never spent the night in jail.
Well, you brought that up, and then I remember, Daddy spent the night in jail, drunk driving in Paris, Texas.
Yeah.
And it's like it was a big deal. I mean, we were like freaked out, but some cop pulled him over and said no, even though he was a very safe driver, drunk. I mean,
Yeah, he was a trained athlete. Well,
he was came from the generation where, of course, you drank and drove.
yeah.
But I mean, he could have gotten somebody killed too. So that's a bad thing. I just want to make sure everybody knows no drinking and driving. It's stupid.
But okay. So now we're getting on to what things should we be informed. My argument is we're overdoing it with the police.
Well, let me bring up an example of that I know from home base of overdoing it and why law enforcement overdoes it. We have a licensing board that is in charge of law enforcement. So they're in charge of
Over
psychologists. So they give a psychologist a license, and then they take complaints from customers about that psychologist doing something unethical or something. And so we have a base rate of 0.002, sometimes maybe 0.003, but what that means is What that means is that two psychologists out of 1,000 will have a complaint that's valid. That's that against them. They botched it with somebody. 2 out of 1,000. So
and usually a misdemeanor.
Oh, it is a misdemeanor.
Okay.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're convicted of a felony, if you're a psychologist and you get convicted of a felony, you just lose your license. These are misdemeanors. These are botching it with a client. It's kind of like a customer complaint.
Yeah.
Of like not competent work. It's like if a roofer comes and does my roof and it doesn't work, I can complain to the roofer association. In other words, it's a customer complaint. Also, I'm beginning to believe that figure of the denominator, is it the denominator? The per psychologist. Psychologists see 30 people a year minimum. Maybe more like 100 people a year. Per case, the base rate goes almost to practically zero.
Yeah.
So, okay, but everyone is afraid of the board, because the board can absolutely ruin your life.
And does.
And has. I'm very, very sure they've driven people crazy. I think they actually contributed to someone dying of cancer. I mean, because of the stress level. It is the most stressful thing for a psychologist to be investigated by the board. Well,
and the board isn't taking into consideration. Here they are psychologists, and they understand base rate.
Oh, no, they don't, but
well,
they should. They're supposed to. Then they don't.
They aren't taking that.
They ignore the base rate.
They aren't taking it into consideration, and they're handing everything over to the attorneys who are overactive.
And scamming, or the attorneys charge out of control fees to the board, which passed down to us. We have a high license cost that we're the taxpayer in this situation.
As an engineer, I think we pay more for annual fees than
How much do y'all pay?
I don't remember now.
Well, how can you say you pay more when you don't remember?
Because I remember the two of us talking about this, and
you remember the last time we
were
checked.
We were like triple what you guys were.
Well, you'd be $1,000 if you're triple. You pay $1,000 for your license?
I don't know. I'm not. I just remember when we talked about this 10 years ago, we were a good bit higher than you psychologists were. Y'all were only a couple of $100, right?
Well, we're $350 now.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, $350. Let's say they have. Let's say I think they only have like 800 psychologists in Louisiana that are licensed. Let's say they had 1,000. $350 is like $350,000. And you can't run a licensing board for $350,000, and they're in the red big time. So anyway.
So let's get back to your example of your dad being a drunk driver, because this is the most extreme example of where I question why we're enforcing certain laws. In other words, I'm saying even that we may be overdoing it.
Oh, I don't think so.
Because I think
he needed to be thrown in jail. I don't know that it curbed his behavior, but it got his attention. It got his attention.
But if you're right that he was a good driver even when he's drunk, it's the bad drivers that we want to get off the road. And we ought to do that through our court
system. Well, let me stop and make sure that everyone listening to this knows I disagree with that. Drunk drivers should be off the road, and and they kill people, and they kill innocent children, and that's a good example of when freedom affects somebody else's life. If you lose one person to a drunk driver, that's a moral outrage. That's a moral outrage to me. So this is a particular topic that I have absolutely there's no wiggle room for me on drunk driving.
Okay, well anyway, but my point is, one way to look at it, let's say speeding. Do you have the same opinion about speeders?
Let's stick with drugs, because when you're on the highway, you have a 3,000-pound weapon.
I understand.
I mean, I think the highway stuff is not negotiable.
Yeah, but your passion is keeping me from getting to my point.
Now you've got little children
So let me
being
go-
killed. I'm engaged. I have my mother archetype engaged. Now I've got this envision of a little child being killed by a drunk driver. I can't
Little
stand
child
it.
with their face in the
Well,
in
little
the,
cute little
in-
child. I mean, and it happens all the time.
I know. I'm okay. So let's talk about speeding.
Okay.
Speeding.
No. Let's get off the highway. Come up with another
No, speeding.
example.
I want to stay kind of close.
Okay.
Speeding. Well,
Okay.
can you see my point about speeding?
No, not yet.
Okay, but speeding doesn't hurt anybody until they lose control of the car, right?
Yes.
And
Maybe.
some people can safely drive at a higher speed, and they can safely maneuver around other traffic. They can do it safely. And when they become a reckless driver, then they should be corrected.
After somebody's dead. Now, don't they allow you to go any speed, like on the Autobahn in
Yeah.
Europe? And so there are
Yeah.
places where. So I don't know the statistics.
Where they have no speed limit.
So I don't know any of the facts on any of this. So I'm not a qualified discussant. I don't know. I see the theoretical point you're making, but I'd have to see the facts about this. The highway to me is so different than drug use. A person can use drugs in their own home, and they don't influence anybody.
Well, I completely agree that drug use is the
better
other end of the
example.
continuum. It's a better example because it's the other end of the continuum. Clearly, no one is endangered.
Yeah, it's a pure example, but
drunk
it's a
driving
total victimless crime, whereas anything on the highway can involve other innocent individuals. So
Yeah.
to me, those are two.
Well, in fact, now that I think about it, speeding and drunk driving are probably bad examples.
Yeah,
because
that's
you're
what
at
I was
least
thinking.
you're endangering other people without their permission. It is not a consent.
Yeah, it's also hard to it's hard to come to a conclusion, because how do you figure out if a speeder is safe or unsafe? So it's just not a good. It's not good for our discussion.
But you're right. People that are at home taking some
Drug
illegal drug.
use is a perfect example of victimless crime, and also sexual behavior. People can, I'm sure there are crimes, I'm not sure that we should bring this up, but there are crimes against certain sex acts.
Are there still?
Well, I don't know.
Laws like
They surely don't. Well, why don't we take prostitution?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one, because that's like, okay, let's assume that the woman is completely adult and making her own decision
Sane.
and working her way through graduate school or something.
She's sane.
Why are we supposed to tell her what she does with her body?
That's right. That's
And
a good example.
what business is that of mine? Unless she's a child, unless she's been, unless there's some kind of impairment that qualifies her for supervision by some adult, then. So sex crimes and drug use, those are pure examples for me.
And gambling, I would say.
Gambling, yes, gambling. That's up to
Consenting adults.
consenting
Consenting
adults.
adults, and it's not introducing danger to third parties.
Yeah.
Because
So
the speeding and the
highway to me is
and the
different.
drunk driving are endangering other people, even if you haven't caused an accident. It's like someone who's firing a gun and it doesn't hit anybody. He's still endangering people without their consent.
Firing a gun. Oh, and so we had this example of the McCloskeys brandishing. I love the word brandishing the gun. It's and some AG, I guess it was the Attorney General or some law enforcement gal who happened to be black and Democrat, decided to arrest them for brandishing their guns. I was like, heard the comments on that. It's like somebody should have gotten those two to take a gun training class, because they were more danger to each other than they were to anybody in the protesting crowd.
That's what I heard on the podcast.
She was just waving her gun at her husband. I was like, but apparently,
the podcast I heard about it said that those two people were just as likely to shoot each other as they were to shoot.
I mean, but that brandishing, somebody's like, brandishing a gun is a crime. I thought brandishing a gun fits with evolutionary psychology. Great. It's like in contests, the display of the potential of aggression is how male-male competition works. The bristling of the fur to show, listen, if you fight with me, you're going to be in trouble. Brandishing is a good idea, not a bad idea.
It can be, but I can tell you the self-defense people, they say you don't show the other guy your gun until you're ready to fire.
Well, why do they say that?
Because the other guy might have a gun. If he sees you have a gun, he shoots you before you get a chance to shoot him.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm not expert, so that's interesting. You know, we need to lock and load around here, and I need to take a class on that.
And by the way, I spoke with my friend about that. And anyway,
I mean, the whole country's buying guns, and I feel like if the whole country's buying guns, I need to buy a gun.
I'm working on it. But so this comes back, and just to revisit the topic, which is we're overdoing it in this country with our law enforcement. I won't even say cops. It's law enforcement, and we're talking about licenses and permits and code enforcement. But the three that we talked about that I think are interesting, prostitution, gambling, and drugs. Walter Block commented that when you have an illegal activity like that, that there are 4 things the cop can do, or the law enforcement officer. He can ignore the behavior, he can accept money, an offer of money, he can demand...
To ignore it.
In order to ignore it.
Okay.
He can demand money in order to ignore it, or he can stop the behavior. And of those 4 alternatives, the one that's least agreeable to the offender is stopping the behavior. He doesn't want to stop the behavior.
So you're hurting people into bribery.
But he's agreeing, the offender is agreeing to the bribe so that he can keep doing the behavior.
Yeah.
So the thing of those 4 alternatives, the thing that he wants the least is for that law enforcement officer to do his job. And of course, I don't think Walter Block made this, or he may have made this point, but of course it sets up a system. These cops, they know that those are crimes that are victimless crimes, and
so it sets up a potential reinforcement, is especially if the cop knows it's like, this is a victimless crime. I'm not going to put a lot of work into this, and I can get some money on the side.
It sets up a corruption.
It sets up reinforces
loop.
Corruption.
It sets up a corruption loop.
Well, we don't have any data on that, do we?
No. But that
would be a secret. That would be underground stuff. Of course, you see that in the films all the time about the cops on the take. In Batman, all the cops in Gotham City, all the cops are on the take except.
But I'm saying that political contributions are really just an extension of that same thing. Mm-hmm. That you have people doing business, and they make political contributions. Oh my God,
that's a very good point. I was stunned by how, if you go talk to your legislator, I was told this when I got involved with the psychologist, because I don't care about any of that legislative stuff. That is a zoo, by the way, especially in Louisiana. But that if you go talk to them about, and they're lawmakers, so they're kind of they're in the law and order business too. Yeah, if you go talk to them, you take a $500 check minimum with you, and $1,000 is better.
Yeah.
What's the difference between that and a bribe? I don't see the difference. I don't see any.
There is no difference.
I don't see a difference in that and a bribe.
But
And I
it's the
thought,
same
you're
thing.
serious? And they said, oh, yes.
And those lawmakers have the ability to restrict your competition because your competition may not be making those political
Yeah.
contributions.
So, yeah.
So they
Pay to play.
pay to play. It's the same thing as a cop taking money.
Well, talk about a system for corruption. That's it in a nutshell. So this also goes into freedom, the lack of freedom. Now,
Yeah.
you're not convincing me on the drunk driver and the speeder, but you're convincing me on the legislator who's basically, and you're convincing me with Walter Block's example, that is that legislator then more likely to do the moral thing independent of the bribe, and it's a reinforcer, but it's basically a bribe,
Right.
or is he more likely to be biased, even unconsciously, by the bribe? Let me just tell you, he's more likely to be consciously or unconsciously biased by the bribe.
We're almost out of time, but I don't want to. I want to take the opportunity to mention, because we've gotten into the political bribes and corruption, but Walter Williams, an economist, and I've never heard another economist say this, but this is the only thing that has rung true for me. He said the only way to get rid of the corruption in government is to get rid of laws that favor one group of people over another group of people.
Yes.
And
That is really a brilliant comment.
it's brilliant, and
It's exactly the same for everybody.
exactly the same
Then
for
there's-
everybody.
Yeah, every law applies to every human being.
And there you go. And so that would apply
Level
to
the playing field.
that would apply
Special interests
food.
out the window. All special interests out the window. If a law is good for the goose, it's good for the gander.
to the food subsidies or crop subsidies. It applies to everyone equally.
Everybody.
You don't favor one group of people over another group.
Yeah. So
But however, he's the only one I've ever heard say it, and I've heard a lot of other economists. I've never heard anyone
yeah,
else say
because human beings can't let go of the idea that we can control things, even though there's absolutely almost no evidence that anything works.
it. So
Almost no system the government comes out with. I mean, if you really look at it from a psychological system standpoint, it's usually garbage. I mean, the Louisiana legislature turns out bills every year, 1,000 of them, and 99.99%, when you look at them, are absolutely ridiculously garbage as far as psychological precision goes, as far as social engineering goes. I mean, these people are self-appointed social scientists. That they don't know what they're doing, and yet they turn out social engineering laws constantly.
yeah.
They flood of them.
So I'm going to try to make a conclusion to this episode.
This is
that
a good talk. I've learned a lot today.
Is that
And you've learned that drunk drivers are bad.
they're bad people.
and mostly speeders are bad too, but not quite as bad as drunk drivers. But drunk drivers are evil people.
But my concluding comment is that we clearly are not free like we think we are. To say that at least I'm free, and you're in a country that has the highest incarceration rate in the world, we can't really quite say that. Now, I will still listen to that song, and I'll still get a tear on my cheek. But
It's the illusions that we love.
There are other
the illusion
things.
of freedom.
There are other things I love about this country. Freedom isn't quite really it. But
Well, we're not China.
we're
Not
overdoing it.
we're not communist China where they.
Well, Russia was half of us. So, they're not exactly free. But anyway,
Yeah.
I do think we need to recognize that we're overdoing it with our law enforcement, and it applies to cops at the street level, but it also applies to the white-collar crimes. We're overdoing it.
Oh, my God.
All of our legal system doesn't end up with
Yeah,
people
like
in jail.
someone like Beverly Stubblefield her career is ruined, and they think that she is like corruptly providing Medicare services. I mean, that's another example. That the aggression, not over aggression, the violent aggression of the DOJ on Beverly Stubblefield horrifies me.
Yeah, but anyway, it's a problem that needs to be addressed, and of course, victimless crimes. That's a huge thing for us libertarians. We don't understand why those are even.
All victimless crimes should just be deleted from the books.
Yeah.
If there's not a victim, just delete it.
Consenting, sane adults.
Sane adults that, I mean, I guess I would extend it just like as long as they're not torturing animals. I mean, I do think animal torture, I mean, some moral issues around lower creatures, that bothers me too. But I mean, that's another.
I like that topic, but we can't.
Yeah, we can't go. But I mean, there are some moral crimes to a small degree. But consenting adults that aren't hurting any other living creature, forget it. Just delete it.
I completely agree. That concludes this episode. And now for the footnotes. Dr. Susan Tucker is a Louisiana PhD psychologist known for reducing prison incarceration times while also helping the prisoners recover their lives. Walter Block is an American PhD economist at Loyola University. He is best known for his book, Defending the Undefendable. Walter Williams is an outspoken American PhD economist at George Mason University.